Hey everyone, it's Jason here, and I'm about to show you how you can go about achieving this sound. Okay, that sound that you just heard was from my hardware synthesizer, which is the Dave Smith Instruments Prophet 6 keyboard, which is an analog synthesizer. But in this video, I'm going to show you how you can get very, very close to that sound with just stock plugins that come with your digital audio workstation. In my case, I'm using Logic Pro. So I'll be using the ES2 plugin, and I'll show you what that looks like. Basically, I'm starting here from scratch, just so you have an idea of what you can do from the very start. And so this right here is the MIDI data that played that line you just heard. And so what I'm going to do first is open up a new channel, and this is going to be an instrument plugin, ES2. And I will make this a little bit larger so you can see it a little bit better. Now, first thing I have to do is move this data down to that new channel. And if I hit play, this is what it sounds like right off the bat. Okay, so we're going to start from the factory default. First thing I'm going to specify here is that you want to turn off oscillator 3, and you're going to leave these two oscillators on. They are currently set to a sawtooth wave, and that's what we want. And I'm going to take this, move it up here so that it's a blend of the two oscillators, and I'm going to pull the octave down one whole octave, or 12 semitones for both. Next thing I'm going to do is specify that you want to just leave this somewhere around where it is currently. This is set to 0 cents, meaning that this oscillator gets triggered right on pitch. This oscillator gets triggered about 3 cents sharper than this one, just giving it a little bit of a slight detuned sound. The other thing I want to specify is that this knob right here, you can turn this up, and what this is going to do is simulate some of the natural detuning that happens on vintage synthesizers that were voltage controlled. That effect is present on the hardware synthesizer that you heard in the beginning, and this plugin will also mimic that effect. So let's hear what it sounds like at this point. The next thing I want to do is take this cutoff down, and this is going to simply just turn the brightness down a little bit. And down here, this is the amplifier envelope and the filter envelope. This would be the filter, the cutoff of the filter I just turned down. But down here, this is going to control how that filter reacts to the keys being pressed over time, and this section of the envelope determines the amplitude of the notes when you hit the keys, how the amplitude changes over time. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you in real time what that looks like when I tweak these parameters on the hardware synth, because it's a little easier to do with knobs, in my opinion. And then I'll come back and I'll show you what that looks like here when we dial in how this sounds. Okay, so what you'll notice from those adjustments I was making is that essentially the release knob is going to give you a little bit more trail off. After that note is released, essentially the release is fittingly named. It's just going to basically determine how long that note takes to die off after you've released the note. Decay would be how long it takes that note to die off while you're still holding the note. So if I turn release all the way off and I press a note, you're going to see how that affects it. So I'm going to press a note. Okay, and if I turn decay down, it's a shorter duration. Now sustain is similar to that. It's just that sustain, if you turn it all the way off, it means that the note's eventually going to die, regardless of how high the decay is, for the most part, not always. But if I turn sustain all the way up, it's gonna sustain that note forever. Okay. So for this patch, I'm basically gonna leave sustain very low. And the reason I'm gonna do that is because I kind of want to simulate how a piano would react. A piano is not going to have an artificial permanent sustain. Okay, so I'm going to move this onto the ES2 channel, and I'm going to reproduce what I just did inside the plugin. Okay. Okay, now the next thing I want to include here is that there's something called keyboard tracking. And essentially what that is a way to automatically modulate something based on how high you're playing or how low you're playing. So what that means is the lower notes you play are going to sound darker, so the filter is going to be closed a bit, and the higher notes are going to be brighter. And I'll show you what that sounds like. Okay, this portion right here on the ES2 mimics that. So the source would be keyboard, and then what that's modulating is the cutoff, and it's modulating both of these filters, but we're only using one filter right now, so it's modulating the cutoff of that filter, and this little guy right here determines how extreme that effect is. So if I turn this up, you'll notice a difference. Those high notes are very bright and the low notes are dark. So that's one way that we can simulate the keyboard tracking on an older analog synth. And this is already set up like that by default when you open up the factory default. I didn't actually have to do that. But I wanted to explain that's part of how I replicate these sounds. So it's starting to sound pretty similar. I'm going to go back and forth and compare. Here's the hardware synth. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add effects. And the end result that I had showed you at the beginning, the first effect that had on it is a chorus. And this chorus I'm about to use is right here. And this is, it appears to be the type of chorus you would see on I believe, a Roland Juno. And I'm not sure if that's what they were modeling when they created this plugin, or if they just wanted it to look like that, but it sounds very good. My only complaint about it is that sometimes it tends to chop off the high frequencies a bit on whenever you put it on. But on the plus side, it's a very nice sounding chorus and it's very powerful. It has actually two choruses built in, so you can double up on them. And I will go ahead and start from 0 in order to show you what that sounds like. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to add is a reverb. The reverb that I like to use for ambient sounds, long haul type sounds, comes from a company called Audio Damage, and the plugin is EOS or EOS, depending on how you want to say that, but it's a very good plugin, and I don't think it's very expensive. I think when I got it, it may have been cheap, if not free. So the way EOS is built is it's got two plate modeling effects and it has a hall effect. And I'm going to stick with the hall. And over in this section, it actually has modulation that it applies to the reverb itself. So that's very effective in giving it kind of a shimmery type of sound. You can control the depth on that. This part right here is basically EQ to your reverb. So if you want the reverb to be darker, you're going to cut the highs, or if you want to brighten it up, and as well as cutting the lows out to eliminate muddiness. It's very effective. And then you have a mix and infinite, so you can turn that on and it never stops. So I'll show you what that sounds like. And for some reason, when you adjust parameters while the sound is still happening, it gets you that little crackly sound, a quirk of this particular plugin. So, not sure if you could hear it, but there's definitely a little bit of a chorusing happening on the reverb even after these notes have ended, and it sounds nice. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the end result that I had shown you earlier, and I'm just going to compare back and forth because I think there's still a difference between this and this. So I will go ahead and mute this and then hit play. Compare them. Okay, so right off the bat, you can tell this plugin is still a little bit darker at the moment. Now that's simply a matter of the cutoff knob. I think I had the cutoff a little bit high on this when I recorded it. I would actually probably prefer it to be darker, but just for the sake of matching it, I'll show you what we can do. There's your cutoff knob. The other thing I'm noticing is that the keyboard tracking is less pronounced on the Prophet than it is on this plugin, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this down. Okay, so it's similar. I mean, it's not identical, but it sounds very good. It sounds ambient. It has a nice, sort of a retro type sound to it. It's relatively warm. You're not going to be able to reproduce identically the sound that would come from, analog filters, analog oscillators, but you can get very close, almost to where it's almost indistinguishable if you kind of know what you're doing and you spend enough time on it. Okay, so I'm going to put the links for both of these plugins in the description, so you can get your hands on these if you don't already have them. I do recommend them. And if you don't have Logic, you can still do this type of a sound regardless of the program you use. Generally speaking, what you want to try to reproduce, if you're not using this exact plugin, is, two sawtooth waves, one of them slightly detuned from the other, and if you have an analog variant that you can throw in, that's really going to help as well. And then you want to roughly, reproduce these envelope settings. If you're going for a long decay like you hear, that's what you're going to want to reproduce. So high release and high decay values are going to get you there. Okay, so I hope that this helps you a little bit. This is just a little glimpse of how I do it. And if you are interested in learning more about music production or stuff that I do, feel free to drop a comment. Let me know what you want to hear or see. And also, if you're interested in the music that I create, I've posted a lot of that stuff already on this channel. So I definitely encourage you to go ahead and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And take care and have a great day. Thanks for watching.